Part 46. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 457. Shanghai has a permanent population of nearly 30 million, which is an extremely terrifying population density. But now, it is like an extremely delicious cake being peeped by a dark cloud, and this dark cloud is coming from a distance. Slowly approaching. A man wearing a white suit and tie with serious black-framed eyes was standing on the rooftop of a building, looking into the distance. In his field of vision, he saw a vague point. Xie Zhen took out his mobile phone and made a call. "What is it?" The voice on the other end of the phone came from Liang Sen, who was also Xie Zhen's boss. Xie Zhen has not contacted his boss for a long time. Since the last time he sensed the aura of the radio, his boss was so frightened that he simply hid in the villa and retreated. However, time is indeed a good medicine for healing psychological scars. At the very least, Ji Zhen can hear that Liang Sen's voice has returned to its previous calmness. People are like this sometimes. They are good at disguising and packaging themselves, trying to gain some sense of security for themselves. Obviously, Liang Sen has gradually come out of the shadow of the last broadcast, but Xie Zhen did not defend his boss. He didn't feel happy at all, because he knew that as long as the broadcast came again, his boss would probably be curled up at the feet of his desk, trembling and crying like last time. Xie Zhen did not have the slightest contempt for his boss because of this, but he felt some pity for his boss. This pity, Xie Zhen clearly should be based on the fact that his realm is much worse than that of his boss, so he is not qualified to feel the broadcast based on breath. However, it is a common problem for everyone to feel good about themselves until they face it in person, even if they are gifted. Of course, this phone call was not to reminisce about old times. In fact, since his boss went into seclusion, Xie Zhen only contacted his boss once because the religious organization started activities in the building where his game company was located. Its ghosts, resentful souls, nearly 10,000 resentful souls, and Xie Zhen's eyes slowly became deeper at this time. These resentful souls are undergoing transformation, and they are transforming into evil ghosts. In broad daylight, come on, all the ghosts are coming to the devil's capital. Who is seeking death? Liang Sen's voice was a little sulky. Shanghai is his hometown after all. It should be, but there are not many people who can create such a large formation. This should be a projection of resentful souls condensed and transmitted using the formation. It should have been in the western suburbs where there are not many people, but now, it is obviously out of control. Something unexpected happened and it got out of control. Then, stop it, interrupt it, and destroy it? A smile appeared on Ji Zhen's lips. There are at least 8,000 mutated resentful souls. If I fight them head-on by myself, I have little chance of winning. After saying this, Ji Zhen hung up the phone, and then, his boss Liang Sen appeared in front of him. Perhaps, at least it would take some time before his boss would really end his retreat and come out for a walk, but this unexpected situation forced him to come out early. 8,000 resentful souls. Liang Sen shook his head. It's really crazy. At this moment, several other figures appeared on several buildings near this building. As a metropolis with a permanent population of nearly 30 million, Magic City has a high population density, and naturally the audience density is also high. Liang Sen put a hand behind himself and said in a deep voice. You three, plus me, each of you will be responsible for one side, and my staff will be responsible for catching the fish that slip through the net. What do you think? Liang Sen naturally said this to the other three figures on the rooftop of the building next to him. It's difficult. A woman's voice came. There are 8,000 resentful souls, and we have not arranged the formation blessing in advance. Even if we rely solely on our own strength, it is difficult to be foolproof. Unless we add all the formations in the Shanghai area to all the senior people have also gathered together, we are responsible for the big head, and they will be responsible for the details, so that we can be safer, but those senior people don't have time to summon them one by one now. A rough male voice came, those 8,000 resentful souls are obviously traveling according to one will. If they can gather together now, then, if you think about it, they can be broken into pieces directly. The few of us may be ready to take action, but they will completely disperse. Even if there are 8,000 running pigs, it will not be possible to catch them in a short while, let alone those resentful souls who go crazy when they see a living person. That's better than doing nothing. Try to minimize the damage. Liang Sen's whole body floated, and the three figures on the other three buildings also floated together. The four people took the initiative to move outward in a horizontal plane, preparing to intercept the dark cloud outside the densely populated areas of Shanghai. Xie Zhen silently took off his glasses, took out a piece of white silk from his pocket, wiped his glasses, and said to himself, "What kind of lunatic is he who actually wants to imitate that woman back then to do such a thing of massacring the city?" After talking to himself, he laughed after explaining himself. When that woman went to England, she only wiped out a city with a population of only a few 100,000. There was no comparison with Shanghai. Under the Purple Mountain, the two lamas exerted their power like crazy, their dharma bodies burned, and waves of air swept across the entire construction site. The formation has been completely destroyed, and Amuri is still using his body to seal the exits between the institute and the outside world, so at this time, even the sky above the Purple Mountain has become slightly bluer. Too much. However, both the two lamas and Amuli looked angry and aggrieved at this time. They had planned well and finally had such a chance to get rid of Gyatso at the minimum cost, but who did you expect that this would be the case in the end? After doing this, the two lamas were almost exhausted. Both of them were kneeling on the construction site that had been swept away beyond recognition. They really didn't dare to gamble, nor did they dare to hesitate at all, let alone save their strength at all. Because once the 8,000 resentful souls enter Shanghai, the consequences will be almost shocking. When the Wrath of Thunder broadcast comes down, the instigator, the guy who took the 8,000 resentful souls directly to the city of Shanghai, will definitely die. It was tragic, but none of them could escape the ending of being pulled directly into the world of the story and killed by the broadcast. Even the British who had just stood here and just watched for a while would be greatly affected. They were really scared and panicked just now. They had never seen such a madman who did not hesitate to die with him and others. He even wanted a $30 million metropolis to be buried with him. That madman only has revenge in his eyes, without any mercy or hesitation. Amuri also ended his seal, covering his chest with one hand and supporting the ground with the other. There was almost no blood in his whole body. "Two senior brothers, please retreat and go back first. We cannot stay here for long." Amuri swallowed hard. The difference in the current state of the three people was beyond their expectation before coming to the mainland. And here in Nanjing, there are also a lot of listeners. No matter how powerful the listener is, he must learn to keep a low profile and hide himself when he is injured or in poor condition. Who doesn't have a few enemies after being around now? As for the relationship with those enemies, they were already in a state of chaos. They came directly to kill me, and they could probably tell the so-called legitimate cause and effect. Therefore, I can't stay here. However, the three of them didn't seem to notice, or it could be that the situation was too critical just now, and they had no time to pay attention to such trivial matters. That is, the formation that they originally used to imprison Fatty was also affected by their previous sweep with power. If it is broken, in fact, even if it is not broken, it will be difficult for them to support the operation of any magic circle in their current state. And the fat man who was tied to the stake, at this moment, the fat on his face trembled inadvertently. Immediately, the fat man's eyes opened a slit, and 2 lines of blood and tears fell down. It's not that the fat man was sad. These blood tears were not shed because he was worried about Gyatso Subai and the others, but because the fat man was in his soul. After being sealed, he was still constantly attacking the seal. At this time, his body's energy and blood were boiling, and his soul was also somewhat scattered. However, I, who is good at pretending to be a pig and eating a tiger, was actually tricked by someone doing something like this, and then I was tied up here. This kind of humiliation, this kind of anger, almost destroyed all the fat man's sanity, but the fat man was not Sudbai after all. At this time, he was still persevering and pretending. At the moment, the two lamas and Amulai, who were taking a breath and recuperating on the construction site and planning to leave soon, didn't notice at all that the sky that had just turned blue slowly turned gloomy again, and there were dark clouds. Occasionally a thunder snake would disappear suddenly, but it was disguised very cleverly, as if it was really going to rain. Just rest for a little longer. Just rest for a little longer. Then, have a taste of your fat man's thunder. Fatty knew in his heart that if he could not save one of these three people this time, then he would not be able to explain to Sudbai and the others at all. In fact, with Sudbai's character and the monk's shady character, they might even just find someone else. Opportunity to eat him alive. The resentful souls around them dispersed one after another. It can be seen clearly that these resentful souls are very unwilling. Obviously the huge blood food is in front of him, and it is not far away, but he can't reach it. These resentful souls are not their true bodies. Their true bodies are still in the research institute at the foot of Purple Mountain. Therefore, when the formation under the Purple Mountain was destroyed, these resentful souls that were projected over naturally dissipated. When the last resentful soul around him disappeared, Sudbai was left alone, still staggering forward, with almost no blood left in his whole body. The body shook for a while, the resentful souls dissipated, and the energy supporting Sudbai's chest also naturally dissipated. He was actually overdrawn. In order to attract the resentful souls to follow him, Sudbai spent too much blood. He reluctantly raised his head and looked at the high-rise buildings not far away in front of him. Sudbai didn't feel the slightest pleasure of cracking the opponent's game, but instead felt a sense of disappointment. What a beautiful and grand funeral. It just came to nothing. He. What a bunch of cowards. B. After such thoughts flashed through his mind, Sudbai fell to the ground with a hint of disappointment, unconscious. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 458. So cold, really cold. In a daze, Sudbai felt as if he was in an ice cellar. The biting cold stopped stimulating him all the time, stimulating every pore in his body, stimulating his skin, and stimulating his bones. At the same time, it also stimulates my soul. Sudbai had not experienced this cold feeling for a long time. At this time, he felt as if he had returned to the beginning. Every time he was seriously injured, his desire for blood almost broke through all his reason, and I really need a lot of fresh blood to replenish myself. Drowsily, Sudbai smelled a scent, which almost drove Sudbai crazy. He suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed forward. Ah! A cry of surprise came. Sudbai also subconsciously opened his eyes. The darkness left and the light reappeared. A pretty and cute female nurse stood in front of him with a little panic, and her wrist was held by him. You're awake, I'll call the doctor, that's great. The female nurse came out of her initial panic when her hand was grabbed, and immediately broke away from Sudbai's hand and ran out of the ward. Sudbai stared blankly at his palm, with a hint of hesitation in his eyes, but also a kind of determination hidden in his eyes. However, waking up does not seem to be a good thing. The cells all over my body are now like a long-lost child who has found his father and begins to talk to his father one by one. He feels pain all over his body, even in every organ. The pain swarmed in and tortured Sudbai's nerves. If Sudbai hadn't had a willpower far beyond that of ordinary people, he might have fallen into a coma not long after waking up. Here. Is it a hospital? Who sent me to the hospital? So, what about those two bald donkeys? The ward door was pushed open, and the person who walked in was not a doctor, but an acquaintance of Subai's. Xiaozhen was holding a plate with peeled apples and pears on it. He walked in naturally, stood in front of Subai's hospital bed, and said with a smile, "I thought the first thing you did when you woke up was to suck that female nurse off." Xiaozhen said very casually that a human life was really of no importance to him. Subai was really not surprised that Ji Zhen appeared here and said such words at the same time. When he was still living in the detective agency, he had contact with this guy again and again. If Subai hadn't noticed anything yet, it is impossible for Subai to survive step by step until today. The reason why the matter of Chu Zhao's organization ended without any problem in the end was obviously because of this person. "I'm not that hungry," Subian said insincerely. In fact, just now, the little nurse really walked away from the gate of hell. Haha, anyway, if you kill an ordinary person and broadcast it, you will pretend that you didn't see it. Xiaozhen put the fruit plate on Subai's bedside table, took out a white handkerchief and wiped his hands carefully. "Didn't you think about it before? Are you going to drag the entire population of 30 million people in Shanghai to be buried with you, and now you are actually going easy on a little nurse and suppressing your endless desire for blood?" "This is my freedom," Subai said. Xiaozhen nodded. "Okay, your freedom." Xiaozhen suddenly thought that when he walked to the unconscious Subai, the guy actually had a sarcastic smile on his face, and even stiffly gestured with a middle finger with his left hand. Really, it makes people a little speechless. "You have been in a coma for 3 days. During these 3 days, you have been transfused with plasma that is 10 times more than what an ordinary patient needs every day. I'm sorry, I can use my connections to give you blood transfusions, but they are all blood donated by ordinary people. For you now, it can only restore the activity of your body, but it is far from enough to restore your vitality." "Thank you." Subai said these 2 words. In any case, the other party sent him from the wilderness to the hospital. Otherwise, if he was left to lie there alone, God knows what accidents would happen. Senior, although he often claims to be a god, the possibility of his death is very high. Even in the real world, various accidents will happen. Your 2 friends are in the ward next door, but their condition is much worse than yours. Although they are still alive, they have fallen into a deep vegetative state. It is estimated that they will have to wait until they enter the next story world before they can rely on the power of the radio to recover. Xiaozhen took a toothpick and inserted a piece of apple into his mouth, chewing it slowly. His hands were very white and his lips were also very round. Subai took a deep breath and closed his eyes. "In my heart, I was thinking that the person who could be this guy's boss in the real world, if nothing else happened, should be a certain audience leader. With such a charming subordinate, I guess he would have that orientation." If Liang Sen knew what Subai was thinking at this time, he would probably spit out a liter of blood in the basement of his villa. He was an infatuated man who couldn't forget about lychee. He even had the idea of becoming the little guy's stepfather, but later the 4 monks Subai actually appeared in the simultaneous broadcast of Lao Fang's counter-attack to kill Magpie Nest Jozan, completely ruining his previous plan. "Do you need me to notify your friends or family for you?" Xiaozhen said slowly after eating another piece of pear. "No need, I'll just lie down here. It's not absolutely safe for the 3 of you here." "I can't always stay here," Xiaozhen said. "You have rescued the 3 of us, and you also said that I was in a coma for 3 days. It should be impossible for you to just leave and let the 3 of us have an accident, causing all your efforts for the past 3 days to be in vain." Xiaozhen shook his head noncommittally. "When you were unconscious, you probably didn't notice the broadcast notification reminder. I put your phone under your pillow, so you can take a look at it yourself." When Subai heard this, he reached out and took out his phone from under the pillow. He clicked on the screen and found a message pushed by the Kongbu 66 public account. This was a picture and text push, which meant that all listeners would receive the message. Clicking on the picture and text, the title made Sudbai's pupils shrink suddenly. Announcement on broadcasting suspension for 3 months. The following content generally means that the broadcast will be suspended for 3 months. At the same time, it also explains that the authority of the administrator will be increased. If any listener wants to cause trouble during this period, the administrator can help the broadcaster. Kill directly, this is a release of power by the broadcaster. 3 months. Sudbai understood a little. What he said before was really not just casual talk. He had guarded the 3 of him here for 3 days, but there were still 3 months left. If it were Sudbai, he would probably I was too lazy to guard 3 almost disabled people for another 3 months. Then, please send the 3 of us back to Laofang's house, Sudbai said. In the future, the 3 of us will repay you. Originally, Sudbai was not willing to let an outsider like Xie Zhen send the 3 of him back to Laofang's house. The formation of Laofang's house had been modified by 2 formation masters, Fatty and Monk. If Xie Zhen went, God knows what would happen to him. What clues can you see? But it can't be done now, because if Xie Zhen is not willing to basically protect the 3 of them as a nanny for 3 months, then he really has no choice but to go back to Laofang's house to escape. At least there's a lucky one there. It was almost impossible for Jixiang to come to the hospital to take care of him, but if he and others were at home, Jixiang would not be able to let any danger come close to his home. This father failed, and he actually had to rely on his son's nanny for protection. It will be suspended for another 3 months, why? Sudbai asked. Sudbai remembered that the last time the broadcast was suspended for 3 months, it was because there was a problem in the story world of the broadcast in several batches. There were people like the black convenience store owner and the devil in the painting on the Taoist mountain who could sense the broadcast and control the story world. The characters have seriously affected the broadcast's control of the story world and its pursuit of storytelling. For example, when Sudbai and Sophia teamed up to fight out, they thought there would be a life and death battle when they finally arrived at the convenience store. In the end, Sudbai directly handed a cigarette to the black convenience store owner and chatted with him for a few words. The black boss let Sudbai and Sophia leave alive. Because they know that broadcasting wants to pursue storytelling, they deliberately go in the opposite direction to disgust broadcasting. Since that hiatus, the natives of the story world that Sudbai met have never seen the kind of people who see through the nature of the world. So, what is the reason for this suspension? Xie Zhen put another piece of fruit into his mouth, because the people who left are coming back. Come back, Sudbai said in shock. Don't you know that woman too? Your cat has been following her for a long time. Xie Zhen took another bite of fruit. Lychee and the others are coming back. They actually can come back alive? The broadcast has to arrange for their return. There are a lot of things involved, so the broadcast will stop broadcasting to concentrate on dealing with it. I don't know the specific details. After all, my level is not good enough. Has anyone ever come back after leaving? Sudbai asked. Hearing this, Xie Zhen shook his head. I don't know, maybe there is, maybe not. After saying that, Xie Zhen picked up his coat hanging on the hanger and put it on. So, do you have anything else to ask? If not, I will send you home now. The company's new game will be online soon. There are a lot of things to be busy with. In particular, after his boss learned that Li Ji was coming back, he no longer paid attention to the company's affairs even though he had already left the country. This made Xie Zhen somewhat helpless. Subashan pointed to the empty plate on his bedside table. One more question, shouldn't you peel this fruit for patience? Why did you eat it all yourself? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 459. Thank you. Subai had a good impression of the little nurse who helped her get dressed. She was a very simple and innocent little nurse, with a little bit of cuteness. At first glance, she looked like a girl who grew up in a good family environment. The family environment here is good, which means that the relationship between the parents and the family is very good, and the economic conditions of the family are good. Generally speaking, only girls from such families can retain their simplicity and innocence. Last night, the little nurse changed her clothes and brought coffee to Subai. The clothes she wore could not be purchased for less than 100,000 yuan, and the nurse's monthly salary is actually not very high. The little nurse should be the kind of person who comes out to realize herself. This kind of job and this kind of life are really enviable. You are too polite. This is what I should do. Your body is still a little weak. Take more supplements when you go back and pay more attention to exercise, the little nurse told Subai earnestly. Subai nodded, indicating that he understood. Ji Zhen stood by the door of the ward, tilting his head slightly, watching Subai say goodbye to the little nurse, with a faint smile on his lips. Finally, Subai put on his clothes and got into the wheelchair. The little nurse planned to push Subai out of the hospital, but she came over and said, "Thank you, I'll just come. You can go and do your work." "Oh, okay, then, goodbye." The little nurse waved to Subai and walked out of the ward. Subai leaned on the wheelchair lazily. Xie Zhen pushed him out of the ward. When the elevator went downstairs, Xie Zhen suddenly asked, "A nice girl?" "There is something in the words," Subai said. "Isn't it a wonderful thing to finally go to the hospital and have a simple love?" The elevator door opened, and Xie Zhen pushed Subai into the elevator. Subai was too lazy to deal with this boring guy. Seeing that Subai didn't respond to him, Xie Zhen didn't care. When he pushed Subai out of the inpatient department building, there was an extended car waiting outside. "Can you get in the car by yourself, or I can carry you up?" Xie Zhen asked. Subai struggled to stand up, opened the door and got into the car. In the car, the monk and Gyatso were already inside. Both of them were wearing patient clothes, with their eyes closed, leaning on the seats. They were still breathing and had vital signs, but it was almost impossible to wake up. The thorny problem now is that the broadcast will be suspended for 3 months, and the monk and Gyatso will have to be the living dead for at least 3 months. Xie Zhen started the car. "There are drinks and drinks in the back, you can help yourself." "I won't be polite." Subai took out a bottle of white wine, opened it, and took a sip directly from the mouth of the bottle. For a moment, the car was filled with the pungent smell of white wine. Xie Zhen shook his head, rolled down the window, and drove out of the hospital. "Who tricked us? Do you have any clues?" Subai asked. Subai was already angry in his heart, but now that he saw the unconscious monk and Gyatso, that anger naturally rose up. If nothing else happens, these two monks should be looking for their damn eagle on the way to Yinchuan. It is very likely that they will be dragged along as helpers. Now these two monks can only sleep here. Be a damn vegetable. "If I tell you, what are you going to do?" Xie Zhen asked while turning the steering wheel. Subai shrugged, "Kill them." "You?" Xie Zhen asked, "You now?" Xie Zhen seemed to have heard a funny joke. "Now you, even a gangster with a gun can kill you." Subai spread his hand, put his index finger to his lips and licked it gently. "You know, people like me can recover from injuries much faster than you, as long as there is enough blood. Although the radio is off the air, it does not mean that listeners can do whatever they want," Xie Zhen reminded. The radio," Subai cursed directly. "Now all I can think about is revenge. The slings of those guys who want to kill me for no reason are broken off and stuffed into their own anus." Xie Zhen nodded, took out his cell phone and handed it to Subai. Subai took the phone. There was a picture on the screen of the phone. A foreign dignitary met with the Lama from Tibet. This Lama has really grown up with several generations of Chinese people. It is said that good people will not live long and will cause trouble for thousands of years. It was most obviously reflected in him. Don't tell me, I can understand that he can fool those white-skinned pig celebrity politicians who want to pretend to be bad, but can he also command the audience? Subai seemed to have heard the funniest thing in the world. If this old immortal can command the audience, then the photo on the tower in Beijing must be replaced by his. Commanding the audience, Xie Zhen turned off the speaker and asked the car in front to move quickly. That is impossible, but it is still possible for some people to try to establish a political power and achieve the kind of national destiny that founded the country. I thought I was the only one who was crazy. Subai reached out and patted Xie Zhen's back seat. Do you have any cigarettes? Sorry, smoking is not allowed in my car. Xie Zhen refused directly. This is the bottom line. What a boring man. Then what else can I do for you now? Xie Zhen looked at Subai in the rearview mirror. Book a ticket for you and send you directly to Tibet. But there is something I won't remind you. It should be clear that, after all, people who like peace and support national unity make up the vast majority, and those who like to jump up and down are just a minority among the minority and belong to that small group. What you said is the same as what was in the textbooks and broadcast on the news network when I was a child. Taiwanese independence activists are only a minority among the minority. They must rein in the precipice, otherwise they will be playing with fire and burning themselves. But the votes for the Democratic Progressive Party were all cast by the voters themselves. Didn't you see that the country's official propaganda no longer shouts this kind of slogan? It was slapped in the face. You're being extreme. If you just want to find an excuse for yourself to suck blood everywhere, I won't discuss it with you. Xie Zhen looked at Subai seriously. There is no need to rush for revenge for the audience, and you are so two friends, do you really trust them to stay at Lao Fang's house? There should be no shortage of their enemies. The old Fang family's formation is really not as impregnable as you think, and the cat is not as responsible as you think. The car stopped. In front of it was the door of Lao Fang's house. It seems that I don't need to be a porter anymore. Xie Zhen pressed the door lock. He knew that Subai was not very willing for him to enter the house, because if he went inside to see the formation, in fact, there is not much mystery. The fat man in a black down jacket was squatting at the door of the house. At this time, he stood up and walked towards the car. The fat man opened the car door, picked up the monk and gyatso, and walked into the house. Sometimes, having many friends is also a good thing, Xie Zhen said. But sometimes, the more friends you have, the faster you die. Look, you're being extreme again. Xie Zhen got out of the car and placed the wheelchair at the door of the car. Subai got out of the car and sat in the wheelchair. Then, goodbye. Xie Zhen waved his hand to Subai, and then watched Subai turn his wheel and enter the house door. Xie Zhen took out a cigarette from his pocket, lit one, took a puff, and shook the ashes. When Subai pushed his wheelchair into the living room, he found that there was no one in the living room. He continued in and saw that in his bedroom, the little guy was taking a nap with Ji Xiang's company. Ji Xiang noticed that Subai was back, but he just opened his eyes. Just opened my eyes and took a look. The fat man walked out of the back room. Dabai, I placed the monk and gyatso on their beds. The fat man walked to Subai, looking a little embarrassed. Subai raised his head and looked at the fat man. I thought that someone would come back without shame. The fat man took a deep breath. I don't want to deny it or shirk any responsibility. In this matter, I have a big blame. I was useless and was subdued by someone's direct sneak attack. I don't believe that you, Zhang Bei, don't even have the means to defeat the enemy in the end, Subai said with a hint of anger in his tone. That's damn it. At first, I thought their target was just the corpses and resentful souls in the research institute. I didn't expect them to be so straightforward. They came specifically to target Gyatso, and they almost got you and the monk involved. Something happened together. When I realized this, because of my initial hesitation and because I knew from the beginning that they would not really kill me, after my soul was sealed, I also lost the ability to fight back. The fat man's tone seemed sincere. It's useless for you to tell me. Subai looked at the fat man with a half smile, unless you go in now and kill the monk and Gyatso one by one, otherwise, when the next story world starts, do you believe it or not, will they extract your fat to make lamp oil? The fat man smiled bitterly. Dabai, I know what you want to do now, go and take revenge. If you can't take revenge immediately, it will be too aggrieved for your character. Okay, Subai nodded naturally. You, Jongbei, quickly find me a Gundam and let me drive the Gundam to Tibet to avenge them. Now I am sitting in a wheelchair. The fat man didn't say anything, but turned around and entered his room. Then, he came out with a body wrapped in yellow cloth, put it down in front of Subai, lifted the cloth, and revealed a body that was half burnt by electricity. The llama. They were more cunning than I expected. I couldn't really kill them even with a sneak attack, but I forced 2 llamas to give up their bodies, and the other one was chopped into ashes. This one was relatively well preserved. Intact. The fat man patted his generous fat hands and said, "Would you like it to be simple and just add some salt, or would you like to add some onions, ginger, garlic, and cumin?" Subai laughed, and Fatty also laughed together. A strong body, the blood in its body. It was enough for Subai to regain his strength. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 460. Dim lights, religious decorations, swaying candlesticks, and a depressing atmosphere. On the small round tables, people sat with their heads lowered. They seemed to be waiting for something, looking forward to something. Finally, the music sounded slowly, a bit like the praise of a church choir. At this time, it sublimated into a sacred and pious flavor. A group of nuns, tightly wrapped in their clothes, walked down the stairs. They had serious expressions and took small steps. They looked like kind-hearted lambs, hurriedly going to serve their God. Baby, Inidayu. The music suddenly changed, and the heavy metal undertones were suddenly revealed, directly exploding the atmosphere of the scene. At the same time, the group of nuns suddenly raised their heads and took off their clothes, revealing the exquisite Bi, G, and Ni underneath. Although those few pieces of strands were still hanging on their bodies, they played a more important role than taking off all their clothes. Attractive charm. Inidayu, baby. The nuns instantly became the hottest dancers. They shook their delicate bodies and followed the DJ's beats to show off their beauty and moving posture. Down below, groups of solemn spectators began to cheer at this time, with whistles, screams, and the sound of ice cubes being added to the beer. Wow! Earl Shar clapped his hands gently. Obviously, he was very satisfied with this show, and now he was completely immersed in this atmosphere. "Sir, you have such a good hand." A waitress beside Shar put a sip of red wine in her mouth, and then took the initiative to look for her guest's lips. Count Char was naturally delighted, and the two of them kissed each other immediately, and the liquid of red wine alternated between their mouths. The escort girl had an incomparably hot figure. For a moment, Earl Charles couldn't help himself, and began to move his hands up and down. For him, Eastern women had a taste that was more addictive to him than Western women. After a long time, the lips part. "You are really my little devil." Count Char reached out and gently touched the girl's cheek, then a stack of pounds appeared in his palm and was stuffed into the gap between the two towering balls on the girl's chest. For a moment, the girl became even hotter and more enthusiastic, and she sat directly on Count Char's body. "Sir, are you a Christian?" When the girl kissed Count Charles's neck, she discovered the cross on his chest. "Yes, I am God's most loyal believer and the guardian of heaven," Count Skal replied. Then I'm just the opposite of you. The girl pulled down her collar, revealing the two towering masses. On those two pieces of tender flesh, there was a tattoo, and the tattoo was a vampire. I'm a follower of Satan. Then I will conquer you on behalf of God tonight. Earl Shar smiled, but when he looked at the group of tattoos, his eyes seemed a little meaningful. Beautiful woman, can it be said that in the east of you, is it also popular to worship vampires? Yes, they are immortal, they are handsome, they are noble, they are magical. If they need it, I am willing to offer my blood to them. The girl was devout and really looked like a believer. It's really hard for me to understand why holy and pure angels are not as attractive as those poor species in the West who can only huddle up and hide like mice. How can they compare to angels? Angel, the girl suddenly smiled, only good babies and primary school students like angels. Hearing these words, a hint of sullenness briefly appeared in Earl Shar's eyes, and then he pushed away the girl in front of him. I asked for someone else, thank you. The girl didn't know what she had done wrong, but because of the stack of pounds that this man had given her before, she went back to find her mother. What a stupid human being. Earl Shar poured himself a glass of beer and drank half of it in one go. At this time, a figure approached him. Aha, when I say change, I don't mean that a man comes to accompany me. My sexual orientation is normal. Earl Shar turned his head to look at himself with a smile, and then he was stunned. Hello. Sudbai held a cigarette in his mouth and looked at the British man sitting below him. You've got the wrong person. I don't know you. Earl Shar immediately picked up the clothes he put on the sofa and left, going straight to the second floor. This high-end nightclub was built underground. Going up to the second floor leads directly to the road. The iron door on the second floor was opened. At the door, a fat man had been standing there for a long time. When Earl Shar came out, the fat man patted his hand gently, as if he had been waiting for a long time. Earl Shar cursed secretly. I'm curious as to why you continue to stay in China and even come to Shanghai. Sudbai walked out of the iron gate unhurriedly following Shar's footsteps. Is it because there are no international flights in Nanjing? It doesn't seem possible. Okay, brothers, that matter has nothing to do with me from beginning to end. I also want to leave China as soon as possible, as fast as I want, but because of some things, I have to continue to stay here. This is not what I want either. I have no comment on what you want to know. We are all part of a civilized society, so don't make things difficult for me and let me leave, okay? Earl Sal kept his posture very low, especially when he looked at Sudbai. He always had a trembling feeling in his heart. This trembling feeling did not come from the love at first sight between a man and another man, but because the previous scene where Sudbai carried 8,000 resentful souls and marched directly from the suburbs of Shanghai to the city really frightened baby Shaer, and it was not an exaggeration to say that it even left some psychological shadow. Moreover, after they found him, Count Charles immediately understood what they were going to do. As a British listener, it was not appropriate for him to stay in China. At this time, he naturally did not want to get involved in the whirlpool of things between those few lunatics in the East. A madman who dares to bring 8,000 resentful souls with him even if he is buried in a city with a population of 30 million. The other is a group of madmen who want to gain the luck of founding the country. Those llamas, you must be familiar with them. Tell me the location of their llama, and I will let you leave, Sudbai said calmly. Sorry, I was really just passing by that day. If you don't believe me, ask the man who was tied to the stake. His soul was sealed at the time, but his ability to perceive the outside world should still be there. Am I naive, innocent, and innocent? Did you just look there and then leave? And it also consumed one of my precious space magic scrolls. Earl Shar looked at the fat man and asked. It's okay not to mention this, but as soon as Fatty's face is mentioned, an angry flush appears. That incident is simply a stain on Fatty's life. He has always been pretending to be a pig and eating tigers, and he likes to slander people, but he was unexpectedly attacked by others and then he was tied to a wooden stake like a pig, making himself look like a fool. Okay, I didn't mean to expose your scars. I hope you can understand me. Also, let me say it again, please, let me leave, okay. Earl Shar was about to walk towards the road, but Subai's arm stretched out horizontally, blocking him. Very crude, very simple. Earl Shar stood motionless, taking a deep breath, as if he was controlling some of his emotions. Sir, can I understand that this is a provocation? Subai looked at Count Charles with a smile. Isn't your appearance in China a provocation to the entire Chinese audience? I am a helpful person, but I really can't help you with the favor you want me to do. Really, I hope you can understand. What if you can't understand? Subai asked. Although it is certainly inappropriate for me to appear in China, it is even more inappropriate for you to treat me so roughly. Before God decides to punish you, I hope you can be self-aware. Boom. Before Earl Charles could finish his words, he was punched in the face. He flew backwards and smashed into a guardrail on the highway. You. Earl Shar held his right face, which was already bruised and swollen. Subai stroked his fist and walked up to Earl Shar again in an open manner. With a lazy smile on his face, he showed a pair of fangs. The metallic light on them made no one suspicious of them. The sharpness, yes, he is a born hunter, and all beings with blood are his prey and are willing to perish. It even seems that leaving his noble kiss on his neck is a supreme reward and etiquette. The fat man stood aside, with his hands spread out, and the chess pieces rose and fell in his hands. In fact, a magic circle had been arranged around him, and this place would be isolated. Count Char also had a fierce look in his eyes, but he still looked at Subai with some uncertainty and asked. Hey man, are you serious? Either you choose to tell me their location and information, or you will perish here forever. You can try to see if I am scaring you. Senior listeners, even in the real world, I have killed more than one. In fact, when you, the poor mouse, hid in nightclubs, there were many pairs of eyes looking at you. They all thought, it is most appropriate for you to die here and nourish the flowers and plants here with your so-called noble blood. You have stained my pride and faith, you arrogant fellow of the East. Earl Shar stood up slowly, a pair of white wings sprouted from his back, exuding a holy brilliance. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 461. According to legend, there is a saying that if an Eastern listener goes to the West and a Western listener kills him, the price he will bear will be half that of killing a listener in the same circle. Whether this statement is true or not is unknown, because few people do experiments, and those who have done experiments will not publicize it. However, when Eastern and Western audiences go to each other's areas, they keep a low profile. This seems to have become a kind of default habits. Except, of course, the woman named Lychee. In fact, this is easy to understand. Maintaining stability is a purpose that radio pursues in the real world. From the perspective of radio, it is best for listeners in Eastern and Western circles to stay at home and not go out like good babies. It would be really strange to drop by casually and not cause conflicts, so the credibility of this statement is quite high. Of course, Subai really doesn't care about that kind of credibility. Although he hasn't gotten sick at this time, there are two reasons for everything. When he killed Juner and Taizi in Qinhuangdao, he almost died in the punishment story world. Although he was lucky enough to survive, it was still familiar again. If he felt it was necessary, Subai didn't mind doing it again. The first time was because of his mother, the second time was because of revenge. These are all good reasons. Although for other listeners, they are not so extreme and paranoid, and they will quietly wait for the opportunity, but for Subai, it is enough. The white wings slowly fluttered, and Shar's whole body was already floating. His body exuded a holy light similar to the morning light in a church. His face is indeed very handsome, and human beings are indeed creatures who look at faces. Such a handsome face coupled with a divine aura can easily create that kind of beauty. You have angered me, stupid and arrogant Easterner. Last time you were alive, you should really pray at home and thank God for your luck, instead of going out and offending a God so unscrupulously. Apostle. Sudbai suddenly smiled, very exaggeratedly. I'm sorry, I don't believe in God, I only believe in broadcasting. In our East, there is a religion called the broadcasting religion. When the sun rises in the East, I am the only one who is undefeated. The sacred broadcasting culture becomes a martial virtue and unifies the world. Maybe you know in your heart that your God, in front of the broadcast, is just an NPC that can be manipulated at will. Shar was stunned. Could it be that this religion really exists in the East? The fat man who was presiding over the formation outside was trying hard to keep the muscles on his face tense. This made him uncomfortable because he was about to laugh. A vampire and an angel, two opposing entities, just faced each other without any warning on the bank of the Huangpu River in Shanghai. Just like when Sudbai, the monk, and Gyatso just left the Shanghai train station, some things really happened. It came too suddenly. But Sudbai only believes in one sentence, and that is, revenge must be taken as early as possible. Buzz. Buzz. The angel and the vampire moved together, and in the blink of an eye, the two beings collided fiercely. In the eyes of ordinary people, angels should be a weak image, but in fact, it is different. Boom. 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 The two sides were punching each other hard, and no one took a step back or dodge. They just fought hard. The harsh sound of blows kept coming, and the fat man standing on the outside felt his eardrums stinging. The road surface beneath his feet was cracked in pieces, obviously unable to withstand the pressure leaked by these two guys. Finally, after a series of hard blows, Shair punched Sudbai in the neck, and Sudbai kicked Shair in the abdomen. Sudbai spun on the spot and fell heavily to the ground. Shair tried to use his wings to hold himself up, but he still slid to the ground with friction, and his white wings were stained at this time. There's a layer of dirt on it. After a while, Sudbai stood up, bending his body slightly, like a cheetah about to explode. Shar patted the dust on his shoulders and ignored the bruises on his body, although they did hurt. Guardian of Holy Light. A layer of exquisite armor appeared on Shar's body, protecting the vital parts of his body. The white armor exuded holy brilliance, complementing Shar's angelic image. A black windbreaker appeared on Sudbai. It was soft, considerate, and truly tailor-made. It made Sudbai look even deeper and more gloomy. With his wings fluttering, Shar flew up, trying to gain air superiority. However, he had only flown less than 10 meters when a layer of mucous membrane suddenly appeared and enveloped him. The fat man standing on the periphery changed his hands, with a sarcastic smile on his lips. To be honest, the fat man was a little paranoid now. He even felt that he couldn't understand Sudbai's previous actions, but through the incident at Purple Mountain it can be seen that blindly pursuing advantages and avoiding disadvantages, blindly striving to maximize one's own interests in a self-righteous way, has put oneself into a dilemma. Sometimes, it may be best to be simple-minded. No fair, you too. Shar finally got rid of the entanglement from the formation and was forced to lower his height. Who the hell invited you to come to China? Windbreaker took Sudbai and flew straight up, just in time to meet Shar, who was descending. Shar snorted coldly, and a silver spear appeared in his palm, stabbing Sudbai. Sudbai didn't dodge, or even slow down, but charged directly into it. Puff. The spear pierced Sudbai's body, and the purifying light burst out in an instant. Fortunately, although the windbreaker could not completely block the sharp spear, it was able to remove most of the purifying light. Sudbai's momentum continued unabated, and his shoulder was already pierced by a spear, but he still went in this direction. Count Shar's pupils shrank suddenly. He had never encountered such a ruthless person before, but at this time, he was already approached by Sudbai, and one of Sudbai's hands grabbed his neck. Earl Shar's figure plummeted, and the speed blessed by his wings was still very obvious in the battle. However, Sudbai was trying to find the moon from the bottom of the sea. It didn't matter if he didn't catch Shar. Just catch his wings. After all, such white and beautiful wings are really unpleasant to look at. Buzz. The wings were caught, and Earl Shar's figure suddenly froze. Just when he was about to counterattack, a Hellfire shotgun appeared in Sudbai's palm, and he continuously pulled the trigger against the white wings. Bang! 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 Count Shar let out a muffled groan in his throat. These wings were not an add-on like Sudbai's windbreaker, but an organ that truly grew on his body, no different from his hands and feet. One wing was beaten with blood by Sudbai, and all the hair fell out. Immediately afterwards, Sudbai stomped down hard and stepped on Earl Shar's shoulder. Earl Shar's whole body immediately falling like a missile. He also wanted to rely on his wings to stabilize his body, but because one of the wings was missing, it was difficult for him to maintain balance, and he fell down almost as if he was spinning. Boom! A crater was made on the ground, and the angel was no longer so holy and pure. At this time, he was bloody and embarrassed. Whoosh! The sound of violent friction in the air came from above his head. Count Shar raised his head and saw Sudbai suddenly descending from top to bottom, rushing directly towards him. A scroll immediately appeared in his hand, which was a scroll with light attributes. Has a strong targeting and restraining effect on dark camp creatures. The scroll was spread out. However, when Count Shar was about to activate the scroll, the fat man on the outside suddenly crossed his hands, and all the chess pieces in his palms were shattered. The formation collapsed, but the power of the formation was at this moment totally inspired. Wow! Shar could only watch helplessly as the scroll he just took out became shattered, and at the same time, a terrible force crushed it down and hit him like countless hammers. Puff! A mouthful of golden blood spurted out, and Shar's whole face showed a look of horror, because Sudbai had already come down, but he didn't even take the most basic defensive measures. In Shar's eyes, blood lines appeared on Sudbai's body, as if a barbarian from an ancient tribe had obtained a terrible secret inheritance at this time. Blue flames also appeared in the air. This was the violent friction of the air. The effect comes out. It's really so terrible. A smile appeared at the corner of Sudbai's mouth. The angel below was like a lamb looking at him pitifully. So cute. Boom! Sudbai's knee hit Earl Shar's chest hard. Click! The armor immediately shattered and scattered, followed by the sound of broken joints. Shar's whole body was bent by the impact, and there was a huge cloud of sand and dust all around. When the dust slowly dispersed, the figure inside was revealed. Sudbai stepped on Shar's chest. Shar's limbs were spread out. There were cracks and damage everywhere on his body. His wings had disappeared, and the divinity on his body had also disappeared. You, 2 against 1, it's not fair. Shar's mouth was filled with fragments of his own organs, and he couldn't even speak clearly. Yes, if it weren't for the formation that Fatty arranged in advance, he would still join forces with Fatty. Sudbai also knew that he would not be able to beat this Birdman so easily, that he would lose the ability to take care of himself. In terms of strength and magical weapons and equipment, he is actually about 50-50 equal to himself. Now, you can make another choice: tell me the location of those llamas, or die. Sudbai said calmly, while raising the gun in his hand and pointing it at Earl Shar's head. I don't believe you dare to kill an audience member who has no causal relationship with you. As a holy angel, my pride and dignity are countless times more valuable than you imagine. As if Sudbai didn't hear what Shar said at all, his finger began to press the trigger. Calm expression. Eyes calm. The movements are calm. Infinite fear suddenly emerged in Char's heart. He suddenly realized that the Oriental man who was stepping on him was not bluffing with him. He could really kill himself, the audience, regardless of the punishment of the broadcast. Suddenly, the image of Subai carrying 8,000 resentful souls to Shanghai appeared in Char's mind. He's a madman, he's a psycho, he's a devil. When the trigger is pressed down even a little bit, it will be fired. Char roared violently. However, my country is the first Western power to recognize New China. As a member of the royal family of this country, I respect and understand China's One China principle. I also deeply hate China's separatist forces. I am the same as you. Hate the kind of terrorists who try to divide the country. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 462. Did you really plan to kill him before? The fat man asked while driving the car. The guy had a cigarette in his mouth but did not light it. Subai put his hands behind his head, put down the seat, and lay half in the car. After hearing the question asked by the fat man, he said, "What do you think? Half truth and half lie. If someone else does it, it will really feel fake, but if you do it, it will feel real." Fatty replied. Whatever. Subai took out the bottle from his arms. There were a few drops of blood in it. At this time, the blood in the bottle showed a brilliance and restrained feeling. If I don't bring that body back, are you going to drink it to regain your strength? Fatty asked. Maybe, but the side effects of drinking it are more obvious. Subai sighed, especially since I was in really bad condition at the time, it was difficult to suppress the side effects. Subai remembered that the last time he absorbed the drop of ancestors' blood, he had been intermittently hazy for a long time. At that time, he was still in his peak state, and if he swallowed these few drops of blood when his vitality was seriously injured, it would be very difficult. It may cause you to get lost in the memory of blood. Just like Zhuangzhou Mendi, if you can't tell what is foreign memory and what is your own memory, the level of danger will be terrible. If a person's memory has been tampered with, forgetting his past, and blurring his identity, there is actually not much difference between death and death. Subai had read a novel that discussed philosophy before, which meant that human life actually has many ways of expression, not just limited to whether the physical body is still active. If a person's memory has been tampered with, or called a person's memory is replaced by another's memory. Regardless of whether the theory is true or not, this feeling is like a person continuing to live, and the person who was originally alive is actually dead. Let's wait until the monk and Gyatso wake up and we can help you protect and bless it before swallowing it. Last time the three of us helped you bless you to enter the vampire's memory screen, we all felt a lot of pressure. If you are alone, it is really easy for people to lose themselves if they go in. Moreover, the guy you deduce to have lived in that period must be very dangerous. Although we refined him that time, who knows if this will happen? It will be his old suspicion formation. Subai nodded. If he could not take this risk, it would be better not to take it first. Especially now that he was on his way to do something. If anything went wrong, he would be in a hurry. Are you sure that the address given by the birdman is correct? Subai looked at the fat man. It should be right. I personally put it on the table and asked Lao Jun to be his witness. Then he swore in the name of God that he didn't lie. I think there should be no problem. Belief or something is actually not worth much, Subai said calmly. This kind of thing is usually just mentioned and shouted slogans, but if it is in a formal occasion, it must be taken seriously, otherwise it will bring great disaster to oneself. His inheritance and strengthening are better than mine. Taoism is more straightforward and direct. Most of them actually practice a kind of celestial induction, which is to obtain blessings from God or heavenly power from somewhere. I'm just worried that he may tip off the people over there. Even if he wanted to tip off the news, he wouldn't do it now. He would probably have to wait until the two of us arrive in Tibet before tipping off the news, forcing those llamas to fight us to the death. A llama has a chance to escape from our pursuit. If he wants to take revenge on us, it should be in this pattern and rhythm. The fish is dead and the net is broken. The fat man pursed his lips. They didn't kill me at first, and they never made any gesture or thought of killing me. So if I retaliate, I can only beat them half to death at most, but I can't kill them. Kill them or I will be punished by broadcasting. But Dabai, you can. They almost killed you, and you were strangers to them before. This is also the reason why I did not go after them directly but returned to Shanghai from Nanjing to find you. Subai looked at the fat man, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Subai might not even know what the smile meant. I believe it, Subai said calmly. That night, after getting on the plane to Lhasa, the fat man fell asleep directly. Subai could see that he was indeed very tired. From the moment he cut off his soul to atone for his sins, to being attacked by a sneak attack, and then counter-attacking those llamas, to finally setting up a magic circle to forcefully suppress the angel, the fat man actually never rested. This is not like Fatty's style. The reason may be because Fatty himself feels guilty. He had previously concealed the fact that he was studying cause and effect, which had caused cracks in his relationship with other people. Later, because of his mistake led to the almost death of Monk Subai and Gyatso. If Fatty still wanted to restore some relationship, the only way was to take revenge and take revenge before the monk and Gyatso woke up. Otherwise, from now on, he and Subai were completely strangers. The plane landed first, and the shock when it landed woke up the fat man. He rubbed his eyes and asked, "Are we here?" "We stopped in Kunming and haven't arrived yet." Subai flipped through the newspaper in his hand. "Oh, not yet." The fat man fell asleep again. By the time we arrived at Lhasa airport, it was already late at night. Most of the plane was filled with tourists, and only half of the seats in the cabin were occupied. This resulted in the food being distributed in 2 portions per person. The fat man saw Subai after eating 2 portions. After eating just a little bit, Subai took another portion and ate it too. As soon as you leave the cabin door, you can see warning signs reminding tourists to walk slowly and be careful of altitude sickness. For people living on the plains, it is very uncomfortable to suddenly go up to the plateau, even if you walk hastily on the steps. Fortunately, Subai and Fatty both had extraordinary physiques. They went to a car rental shop in the front building of the airport almost non-stop. Fatty had booked a car before, and at the same time he gave a tip and asked people to wait for their flight to arrive. Get off work. The fat man drove first, and Subai sat in the passenger seat, feeling a little bored. Because the weather was relatively good, the starry sky was quite beautiful at night. Fatty concentrated on driving, while Subai stared at the night sky in a daze. Unfortunately, this is not a quick trip. Whether it is coming by plane or driving at high speed now, it is actually to rush for time. Some things are destined to be hidden for a long time. Before the news leaks, Subai hopes to find the hiding places of those llamas. First, they were frightened because they took 8,000 resentful souls to Shanghai, so they spent their energy to destroy all the magic circles at an extremely fast speed, and then they were attacked by Fatty with thunder tribulation. Now those 3 people should be in a very bad state. In this state, only the guy named Amulai still has a physical body, and the other 2 llamas only have their souls left. Just when his illness was killing him. The fat man drove like this all night, and waited until the next morning before stopping at a service area to refuel and have something to eat. Perhaps because they were not used to the decoration style and atmosphere of the service station, Subai and Fatty both bought food and ate it in the car. Dabai, we have actually broken away from the traditional tourist attractions. I didn't expect that there are still so many tourists. Most of them are self-driving, the fat man said while biting the bread. For young and artistic young people, they come to Tibet to purify their hearts and pursue a higher B level. Traditional scenic spots have been developed too well, so they can no longer satisfy their style, so they go farther away, hoping to see something more original. Sudbai took a sip of orange juice. The orange juice obviously didn't taste very good. It was a bit watered down. It tasted like boiled water that was a bit sour. It's really leisurely. The fat man opened the car door and looked ahead while chewing his food. There was a group of pilgrims heading towards the Holy Land in their minds, and there were many well-dressed tourists gathering around them to take photos and group photos. Every October in Tibet, there will be a large number of people from various regions, as well as Yunnan, Gansu, Qinghai, and Sichuan, who go to Tibet to worship the Buddha. After harvesting their crops, they go to Tibet's Potala and Jokhame temple to worship the Buddha. Tibetan Buddhist believers have always held the view that they must go to Tibet once in their lives to see the Buddha. There is a Buddha statue in the Jokhame temple in Lhasa that was consecrated by the Buddha Sakyamuni himself during his lifetime. There are only 3 statues in the whole world. The one in the Jokhame temple is called Awakening. Sakyamuni once said, "Seeing my Buddha is like seeing my own deity." Pilgrims usually go from a village or a family, and some go alone. They carry food with them and kowtow 3 times until they are tall and long. They believe that kowtowing 100,000 will eliminate their bad karma and go to the paradise of paradise. The fat man stretched and took out some change from the car. It seemed that he was ready to give alms like the tourists. "Dabai, I think they are truly pious like this," the fat man exclaimed. Human beings' spiritual conditions and material conditions tend to be in a state of ebb and flow. Fatty obviously understood the implication of Sudbai's words. "Bye Max, you are such a little spoiler of freshness." Sudbai smiled slightly, put down the food, took out a paper towel and wiped his hands. The fat man walked over and handed over $100 in change to a female pilgrim. Sudbai sat in the car and watched this scene. In Sudbai's opinion, maybe the fat man's personality has really changed a lot since he understood the cause and effect. The fat man before was more materialistic and egoistic than anyone else. Perhaps, the fat man from before was more approachable. The fat man turned around and motioned to Sudbai to take a photo of him. It was so hard to do this, so he had to leave a souvenir or something. Sudbai had no choice but to pick up Fatty's cell phone in the car, turned on the camera, and pointed it at Fatty. Then, in the mobile phone camera lens, Sudbai saw the female pilgrim behind the fat man who had just taken his money suddenly turn into a black mist, and then stabbed the fat man directly in the back with a sharp dagger. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 463. The fat man was still posing there, waiting for Sudbai to take a photo of him, but fortunately, he was not so relaxed that he really regarded himself as a tourist. Although the assassin's murderous intention was concealed, at the critical moment, the fat man's instinctive feeling is still there. A small bloody sword appeared at the fat man's neck, and it happened to collide with the dagger. Ding! There was no sound of flesh and blood rolling, there was just a muffled sound. Although the small sword helped resist the sharpness of the dagger, the force still vibrated and was transmitted to the fat man's neck. The fat man was stunned by the impact. When he turned around subconsciously, the opponent kicked the fat man in the abdomen and kicked him out. Sudbai was sitting in the car and could clearly feel it. The fat man slid all the way and hit the front hood of the car. One blow failed to kill him, but the opponent did not choose to retreat, but rushed towards the fat man again. At this time, the tourists around him continued to do their own things, and the pilgrims continued to kowtow devoutly, as if you can't even see what is happening here. They must have arranged a formation to block the line of sight in advance. The other party is really well prepared. When the woman approached the fat man again, the fat man was still dizzy and unable to control himself. Even senior listeners are not incapable of being killed. The black listener was knocked down by an ordinary person with medicine and then shot 3 times between the eyebrows without even having time to take out the compass, his natural weapon. He was so aggrieved. Dead. There are actually many such examples. Buzz. The front window glass shattered in an instant, and Sudbai's figure appeared in front of the fat man. What happened before was so fast that Sudbai had no time to react. Even the fat man involved could only save his life. That's all. And now, if Fatty is really killed under his nose, then Sudbai really doesn't have to mess around. The other party was wearing a very shabby Tibetan clothes, with weather and plateau red on her face. She looked like she was 30 years old. Just because of the climate, the women here would look older than their real age. I guess this woman was just that. Around 25 years old. Even when Sudbai stood in front of the fat man, the woman's advance did not slow down at all, or maybe Sudbai was among her targets. Very confident, Sudbai said with a slight smile. Boom. As soon as the calm words fell, Sudbai was hit hard on the face, followed by continuous blows on the chest and shoulders. The thin-looking little fist showed a kind of she was very strong, and the opponent was very fast, or her movements were really clever, so Sudbai's eyes couldn't capture her position. After being hit continuously, Sudbai couldn't help but start to retreat. Then, a cold light flashed, and Sudbai suddenly dodged the knife. But the other party was really unyielding, and once again leaned towards Sudbai. Sudbai blocked left and pushed right with his bare hands. It was very difficult to deal with it. In the end, Sudbai's palms were directly removed by the opponent in a very strange way. The opponent roundhouse kicked Sudbai's abdomen. Dendenden. Sudbai took several steps back and came to the side of the fat man. The fat man rubbed his neck and looked at Sudbai sideways. Stop playing, okay. This woman is very aggressive, Sudbai said. The fat man took a deep breath and shook his head speechlessly. The woman pounced on him again, like an agile female leopard. There was a sound of joints all over Sudbai's body, as if he was just warming up, and now he really started to take it seriously. The woman's dagger stabbed Sudbai's chest horizontally again. Sudbai grabbed it with one hand and accurately grabbed the woman's wrist. However, when Sudbai was about to exert force, the opponent suddenly seemed to change from a cheetah to a water snake. The soft body took the initiative to stick to Sudbai's body, and instantly exerted force to hold one of Sudbai's arms, and kicked Sudbai's knees hard with the tip of his right toe, forcing Sudbai's knees to bend, and he knelt down. The woman turned over and clamped her right elbow on the back of Sudbai's head. Her left toe stuck on Sudbai's knee. She pinched one of Sudbai's arm joints with her left hand and pressed Sudbai down in a grappling manner. Under him, Sudbai was unable to move. Sister, is there any misunderstanding between us? Sudbai asked. But the woman didn't seem to have any intention of chatting or communicating. She opened her lips and teeth slightly and pulled out a blade from under her tongue. When the blade fell, she bit it with her teeth and then cut it towards the back of Sudbai's head. It's too much. Sudbai warned. The next moment, the aura on Sudbai's body suddenly changed. His body began to shrivel up, and a cold feeling spread all over his body. The knee that was pressed straightened immediately, the neck that was stuck stood up, and the arm that was suppressed was pulled back immediately. The position of Sudbai's body that had been stuck before the woman disappeared in an instant, and, the woman because of this, he was trapped in a cocoon, but was suppressed by Sudbai. Sudbai exerted force with his feet, and his whole body rotated 90 degrees. He flicked one hand violently, knocking the woman to the ground, and then Sudbai stepped on the woman's chest with one foot. I don't know if she was wearing a corset or if she had no altitude in the first place. The soles of Sudbai's feet really didn't feel soft at all and were rather hard. A woman can train this area to look like abdominal muscles. You can imagine how crazy this woman is. Listen to what I have to say, okay? Before Subai could say anything, the woman's eyes suddenly opened. Her eyes were empty, and her body became blurry. A layer of black mist rose up. Subai felt that his feet were empty and he stepped directly on the hard ground. Earth escape? Or is it some kind of tantric secret method? The woman's perseverance was indeed powerful. She did not choose to run away, but appeared behind Subai again. However, her actions again and again clearly pissed off Subai. His previous tolerance for her was only because Subai discovered something. There was a wolf totem mark on the dagger the woman used to assassinate the fat man. That mark was similar to Jiajia's. The one on Tso's chest is exactly the same, so obviously this woman has a deep relationship with Gyatso. So for the sake of Gyatso's good looks, he didn't do anything cruel directly, but even if Gyatso offended Subai, Subai would not give him any face, let alone this woman who had nothing to do with Subai. A layer of ice appeared directly between Subai and the woman. The woman's attack on Subai was completely useless. When she was about to retreat and distance herself, she was shocked to find that she was surrounded by ice in front, back, left and right. The woman held a dagger in her hand, ready to cut through the ice, but Subai did not give her this chance. When Subai stretched out his hand, the ice melted directly. Subai easily grabbed the woman's neck, and then started exerting force. Puff! A mouthful of blood spilled from the corner of the woman's mouth. At this moment, Subai suppressed the impatience and murderous intention in his heart, and finally forced himself to let go of his hand. The woman fell to the ground, covering her neck and coughing painfully. "Gyatso, who are you?" Subai asked. The woman raised her head and looked at Subai with a hint of surprise. "Do you know His Holiness?" I almost got Gyatso's little fangirl killed." The fat man also stood up at this time, and his head was still a little dizzy. In fact, if he hadn't blocked the blade with his natural weapon just now, he would have been cut off by someone in front of him. The fat man is not walking around. As a listener of the enhanced style, he would suffer from close combat. In addition, he was really immersed in a feeling of devout faith in these pilgrims just now, so his vigilance was naturally not high. "Gyatso is injured. We are here to help him deal with some things. You can understand it as revenge." Subai took out his mobile phone and clicked on Gyatso's WeChat column. "Do you use your mobile phone? Or, you just a killing machine that only knows how to hide in a temple and do hard work?" This woman is not an audience. Subai can clearly feel this, because her fighting skills and experience, and even the way of releasing power, are the product of thousands of hard training, which is a kind of practice that has been started since childhood. The feeling can be reflected in the audience, but the audience does not have the conditions to achieve this. Firstly, the reinforcement obtained by the audience saves a lot of time and steps. Secondly, even in the real world, the audience is very pressed for time. Those who are strengthened are Taoist priests or cultivators, and they don't have the conditions to give you decades or hundreds of years of hard work to achieve enlightenment. Everyone is in a hurry. As a result, there have been many listeners with good enhancement levels, but who cannot use their own strength at all. In the last punishment story world, those low-level listeners were slaughtered when they faced real senior people, even if their strength was forcibly improved by the broadcast. "Yes, that's why. I'm not out of touch with society," the woman said. "Then if you look at the chat history between Gyatso and I, you will almost understand the relationship between me and that venerable person in your family." Subai handed the phone to the woman. Fortunately, Gyatso had chatted with Subai before when they had nothing to do. Last time Gyatso went to Yunyua, he even sent a series of photos to Subai in a very sultry manner, which could be used to identify himself. The woman looked at the chat history on her mobile phone for a while and said with some surprise, "I heard His Holiness mention it. He said he had a few friends in the mainland." "Are you, fat?" the woman looked at the fat man and asked. "Zhongbei," the fat man snorted, and his head was almost cut off by a guy who was not an audience member. The fat man himself felt a little blushing, and this woman was also a little fan of Gyatso, so it was really embarrassing. Then, the woman looked at Subai. So, are you mentally ill? Subai. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 464. So, are you mentally ill? After hearing this, Subai suddenly wanted to ask the fat man to buy a return ticket. He would not care about anything or do anything. After returning home, he could stab Gyatso, who had turned into a vegetative state a few more times. That boring slut put an end to her suffering and sent her to the west to see the Buddha in bliss. When the fat man heard this, he laughed hee hee hee. It seemed that he didn't care about what he almost got clicked just now, but he still asked. What did you do to us two before? Because there have been many special people entering Tibet recently. Your auras are fluctuating, and you are not ordinary people at all. They are all gathering towards Talunda Canyon. Our temple has organized many interceptions and killings. Some are successful, and some are not. Failure. Hearing this, Fatty looked at Subai in surprise. Dabai, did the birdman not wait until we were about to find those llamas before sending the message as we had guessed before, but sent it in advance? We only found out the specific location yesterday. We flew to Lhasa that night and drove here overnight. What she was talking about was something that had happened recently. That is, before we tortured the birdman, it should not be the birdman who informed us. Yes, it is also possible that those llamas were seriously injured in the real world, so they found some listeners to protect their own safety. But this is not right. Subai looked at the woman and asked, do you mean there are several groups of people? Yes, there are several batches, with strong and weak strength. Then I'm not here to protect those llamas. There should be other matters. You can post a message on the audience forum later to ask. If you want to find someone to protect you, then naturally you can't let so many people come with such a big fanfare. Isn't this clearly telling your enemies that I have been seriously injured and come and kill me? We are going to the temple where those llamas are. Subai was thinking about what adjectives should be used to describe those llamas. After all, this is a Tibetan area with many llamas and many temples. I know who you are looking for. The woman understood what Subai meant without much effort. They have a secret temple in the Talunda Canyon. It is located inside the canyon. It was excavated into the canyon. It was built after empty space. Isn't this the same as the Xiankong temple? The fat man touched his chin, then took out his mobile phone and checked the map. Dabai, that canyon should be the canyon we are looking for. The location mentioned by the birdman is right. I know that the Xiankong temple is a temple built in the Northern Wei dynasty in Shaanxi, but the temple over the Talunda Canyon was only built more than 10 years ago and has no history, the woman answered. Newly built, the fat man touched his head in surprise. This is okay, doesn't it count as a violation? In the early years, people from that faction were very close to that person. Later, that person rebelled and wanted independence. The People's Liberation Army entered Tibet to quell the rebellion. That faction's temples and strongholds were all removed at that time. The backbone of the faction, they all followed that person into exile overseas, but in recent years the policy has been relaxed, and some of them came back and started to rebuild temples. Because their position is completely opposite to that of our holy temple, we have been fighting openly and secretly with them over the years. The fat man nodded thoughtfully. He could tell that this woman didn't know about the audience. She didn't know that the venerable Gyatso she was talking about was already a senior audience, and there were also listeners over there. There were listeners. With the participation of forces, the struggle between the two parties has actually gone beyond a certain level. However, due to the rules and constraints of broadcasting, no listener on either side dared to take action blatantly. Instead, a kind of restraint and balance was formed. Maybe, In this woman's view, Gyatso was just a very powerful tantric practitioner, and there were also very powerful tantric practitioners across from him, so she didn't understand the profound twists and turns involved. Perhaps, several of the listeners of that sect were not lamas born and raised in that sect, but had become listeners first and then gathered together for that goal. At this thought, the fat man began to sympathize with Gyatso. No wonder that guy was so good that he didn't stay at home very often and liked to travel around. Now he even lives in Shanghai. Haha, I really should give Gyatso a small red flower and a 5-pointed star. Subai didn't plan to linger here any longer, but signaled to the fat man. The fat man immediately got into the car and pulled the seat back. It was obvious that there was still some discomfort in his neck. "You're Talunda Canyon," the woman said in surprise. Although the mainland man who had just defeated her was very powerful, even the Venerable would not go there to provoke him in person. The fight between the two parties mainly reflected the people below. Regarding the confrontation, as a friend of His Holiness, I think I should remind you that it is said that there are several eminent monks who are about the same strength as His Holiness guarding the place. Those eminent monks have been shocked to death by Yang Yangzin. The fat man waved his hand nonchalantly. "It's not convenient for your venerable family to come back now. You go back and restrain those of you from some holy temple. Don't, he's out to carry out an assassination, so just stay here peacefully and don't cause any trouble." After hearing what the fat man said, the woman's face immediately showed an angry look. "If he hadn't taken action, you would have been killed by me before." "You." The fat man choked back, and he was embarrassed to shout that it was not a sneak attack, so he could distinguish for himself. As a senior listener, he was not as particular as the ancient martial arts people. That's not what he meant. What we are going to do now may have a relatively large impact. Only people of your venerable level can participate. In order to avoid unnecessary losses, please inform other people in your temple for the time being. Get back to avoid the limelight. If your venerable were here now, he would also ask for this. As for this fat man, he is not good at close combat, but his ability is no worse than your venerable. He is also, I know, your venerable one." The woman glared at the fat man again, then bowed to Subai and said, "Well, Yang La will go back and inform the temple disciples to return to the temple." "Be careful," Subai said thoughtfully. The woman named Yang La turned around and left, quickly disappearing into the hillside below the road. "This woman is really ungrateful. I'm not happy to argue with her, fatty." After they left, the fat man muttered while starting the car. "Okay, someone has the nerve to say that he was almost killed by an ordinary person." "I feel embarrassed," Subai said in attack. "Oh, it doesn't matter to me anyway. Anyway, I have done more than 1 or 2 embarrassing things in front of you. Fatty, I can let go. I have a big heart and a fat body." The fat man started the car and followed the directions on the map. In fact, he basically didn't have to worry about getting lost. For most routes, you just need to follow the single road in front of you, and then you only need to get off the car when you reach a specific location. Highway to the wilderness. Subai chuckled. "If you didn't remind me, I would have forgotten that you were analyzed by a black man, and it was a black man's body." The fat man took a deep breath, puffed his mouth, and looked at Subai fiercely. "Dabai, I'm driving. Believe it or not, I'll turn the car downhill and let's have fun together." Subai shrugged. "You can try. I can guarantee that even if you die, I won't be able to die. If you show off, I know you have a strong bloodline." The fat man took out a cigarette, held it in his mouth, and asked, "Dabai, you said there are not many people here, and there are highways, signal towers, and wires. This isn't it a waste? When you walk out of the scenic area, except for some people in the service area, you won't meet many people at other places. This is why our phone and data charges are so expensive." Subai held his mobile phone and was checking the map, leaving aside the state-owned enterprise's urinary behavior and the whole business of eating, drinking, and getting stuck in gas and water to line their own pockets, our phone and data charges are so expensive. The reason why the horizontal contrast of fees is relatively high is actually reflected here. Even in the United States, if you go to some sparsely populated places, it is basically difficult to get a signal, but here, your mobile phone can still receive signals. Because the country has invested a lot here, and these investments can actually make a steady profit in eastern coastal cities or normal-sized cities in the central and western regions, but in these places, they are often a loss-making business. And it is a bottomless pit. Isn't this a waste? The country's money cannot be spent like this, the fat man muttered. Didn't you grow up in Chengdu? It's not like you've never been to Sichuan. Those tunnels dug out of the mountains and the roads built. If you rely on toll collection, God knows when you can get your money back. But after all, this is a national policy, common prosperity, blood transfusion from developed areas to underdeveloped areas, and redistribution of national resources. For China's centralized state system of more than 2,000 years, it is a basic policy of governing the country. In addition, we are now this party-state mentality that puts more emphasis on collectivism will definitely make greater efforts in these aspects than previous dynasties. Haha, Fatty sighed, although it's not my money, it makes me feel bad. Subai rolled down the car window to let in the fresh air and took a deep breath. Although the air on the plateau was relatively thin, it was also a rare refreshing experience. Taking a step back, without these roads, without these signal towers, without these and other things, there wouldn't be so much investment and sincerity reflected. Now, Gyatso will not be on our side. He may be in the temple called Talunda Canyon. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 465. I have prepared an oxygen tank. Do you want to take a few breaths of oxygen? After driving for about 3 hours, the fat man suddenly reached out and pushed Subai, who was almost half asleep and half awake. Subai shook his head and continued to close his eyes. The fat man took out an oxygen tank, put the stopper over his mouth and took a big sip. You are really boring. Subai couldn't laugh or cry. I don't know if it's because I tipped too much or because the car rental company was so attentive and prepared several small oxygen tanks for me in the car. If I don't inhale, it won't be wasted. We can't waste it. The fat man took several breaths in a row. To be honest, the thin oxygen did not have much impact on him. Otherwise, he would not have been able to go down to the deep-sea cave in Qinhuangdao with Subai. Why is there a halal mark on this oxygen tank? Damn it, even the air has to be halal. The fat man frowned and threw the oxygen tank directly into the back seat. We're almost there, drive slower and pay attention to the situation ahead, Subai reminded. Yes, Subai nodded seriously. The Tolumbia Grand Canyon is not far ahead. Now you can see the appearance of the Grand Canyon from the car, which means that the llama's lair is nearby. Dabai, there are people in front of us, and there are quite a few people, the fat man shouted. I'm not blind. Subai stretched out his hand to signal the fat man to stop the car first. Is there a tourist group having a picnic here? Fatty asked after looking over, because in front of it, near the Grand Canyon, there were 7 or 8 cars parked there, as well as tents, and some monks walking around. Among them, like a waiter. They shouldn't be ordinary tourists. Do you remember what that little Fang girl from Gyatso said? Recently, several groups of people like us have driven to this area. You mean they are just the same audience as us? The fat man smacked his lips. Are they all the bodyguards hired by those llamas? If they were bodyguards, these listeners should all have entered the temple, but they all seem to be camping outside now. Obviously even the temple is very wary of them. I asked you to check the news on the forum, And you did? No. After checking, there is no news. It should have been released through other channels, Fatty replied. This is a bit interesting. There are at least 7 or 8 people in the audience below, or even close to 10 people, and they had already set out here before the Nanjing incident. Since the gathering is here, it must have been organized by the lamas in the temple before. However, because those lamas smelled the smell of blood, they tried to come to Nanjing to kill Gyatso, but they themselves were seriously injured. When it came to their follow-up plan, the originally organized audience had to arrange camping outside the temple, and they were afraid to let them enter the temple directly. Sudbai guessed, originally, those lamas planned to kill Gyatso before moving on to the next step, but now the plan has been ruined. Dabai, no matter what, as long as this group of listeners who came here inexplicably are not the bodyguards hired by those lamas, there will be no problem. The fat man rubbed his hands. Our goal is to avenge those lamas anyway, so we can bypass them directly, let them sneak into the temple. Sudbai shook his head. If you were seriously injured and there were so many listeners sitting in front of your house, could you still live at home to recuperate with peace of mind? A strange look flashed in the fat man's eyes, and he said, Dabai, you mean those lamas are probably no longer in the temple? It's not very possible. It should be more than 90% like this. Now the bodies of those lamas have been destroyed by you and me. 1 is seriously injured and 2 are left in the state of their souls. In addition, the broadcast was suddenly stopped for 3 months. They estimate that like Gyatso and the monks, they have no chance to recover from their injuries for the time being. When their strength and condition were there before, they could successfully organize an adventure and treasure hunting activity with so many audiences gathered. Now, the audience they had gathered on their own before became their biggest threat. It's hard to get off the tiger, the fat man stretched out, that will be troublesome for us. If those lamas really become fools, we might as well let the audience go. It doesn't mean that we both will be killed. Have the pigeons been released together? They are not hiding in their old nests. How can we find them in such a big place like Tibet? Just as Sudbai was discussing with Fatty, a jeep drove up from behind them at a very fast speed. Moreover, the car had obviously been modified, and the sound it made while driving and the dust it raised were very strange. Dynamic car music can be heard from a long distance away. The car owner should be a very upright person. Because this is not a scenic spot, the people who drove so far away from the main highway in the wilderness must have their own special purpose. In all likelihood, they are the audience. A smile appeared on Sudbai's lips. There is someone behind us. The jeep stopped next to the car where Sudbai and Fatty were sitting. There were 2 people in the car. The driver was wearing a black leather jacket and a pair of sunglasses. The other person turned out to be a black man. Moreover, as soon as he spoke, Sudbai felt that the other person was not the black listener who grew up in China that he had met before, but an authentic foreigner. Hey guys, why don't you go to the front? The other person was holding a large, hemp cigarette in his mouth, and he was still puffing on it while asking questions. Sudbai looked at the man for a while, then looked away and ignored him. The fat man took out his cigarette, lit it, and took a puff. What a profound Chinese. That's what people from strong countries are like, and the same is true for the audience of strong people, the young Oriental man in the passenger seat said with a disdainful tone. Hey, Joe, shouldn't you be from the same country? The black man said to the Oriental young man in his passenger seat. Klaus, I admit that I am Chinese, but I do not admit that they and I are from the same country. That sounds really convoluted. Klaus, the black man, shook his head. Joe, let's go there first, don't let our llama friends wait too long. As he said that, Klaus rubbed himself. To be honest, I'm still a little excited. Those llamas should be from. The young man surnamed Joe did not go on. Obviously he knew clearly that the 2 listeners in the next car should be able to hear clearly what they exchanged. Klaus glanced at Sudbai and Fatty's car again. Maybe he was a little impatient to wait, so he planned to leave, and he was a little unwilling to do so as he said that. Klaus waved at Fatty and Sudbai's car again. He waved, "Hey guys, the event will continue as usual, let's go together." After saying that, Klaus restarted the jeep and drove towards the campsite ahead. When the jeep drove far away, the fat man couldn't help but start spraying, "Your brother-in-law is a powerful man, and you can see Wan at a glance." Sudbai glanced at the fat man and smiled. "Kyangwo people use it more often in Hong Kong, and Taiwanese people use 426 more often, but that person's accent should be the Taiwanese version of Mandarin." "What does 426 mean?" "Dai Alu," Sudbai explained. "Damn, Dabai, why are you so familiar with this?" Fatty said a little surprised. "Don't tell me that you often go online to fight." "When I was doing business in the past, I had frequent interactions with the financial groups there. I also lived in Hong Kong and Taiwan for a lot of time." Sudbai rolled down the car window. "Actually, fighting is love, and scolding is love. The two sides taunting each other and scolding each other can actually deepen the communication." "Dabai, I can't understand your ideological realm. Could it be that the online quarrel between the two keyboard warriors is actually a messenger to promote cultural exchanges?" "Well, at least in my opinion, it is much more useful and obvious than an official organization like the Kneeling Platform." The fat man started the car. "So, let's go there too? I mean, those llamas recognize our appearance. Those llamas will definitely not come out now. It can be seen from the previous Birdman incident that they have a close relationship with the Western audience. This black man should actually have been called over to save the scene. There should be someone. We have to do something big, otherwise we won't be able to attract so many listeners." "Fatty, don't you like fishing in troubled waters the most and are always interested in things like the benefits of magic weapons? I don't believe you are really not interested. It's a bit risky. If your identity is discovered, you'll have to die," Fatty said a little worried. "Besides, Fatty, I think I've been memorizing words recently, so my luck is not going well." "It's okay. You've been unlucky for so long recently. It's time for you to turn around. Besides, even if your identity is exposed, what's there to be afraid of? Those audience members are not llamas, and they can't attack us in a group. At least we still have the confidence to escape unscathed." "That's right." The fat man drove the car over. When they were about to arrive at the campsite, a few monks came out, and the fat man stopped the car in front of them. "Donor, you are a guest here. Please come with us." This monk spoke Chinese very well, so the fat man parked the car here, got out of the car with Sudbai, and followed the monk in front of him into the campsite. The black man Klaus over there has disappeared, and the young man surnamed Joe is standing outside the campground holding some small flags as if playing with something. Seeing Sudbai and the fat man coming over, he didn't say anything. He was looking at his own affairs and mumbling something. Several small flags had been inserted into the ground, and the fat man deliberately walked between them. The face of the young man surnamed Joe originally showed a look of sullenness, but then a look of surprise appeared on his face, and he asked, "Kyangwo people, do you know formations?" "Hello Wan, yes, I know the formation." The fat man and the young man surnamed Joe directly faced each other with big eyes and small eyes. This scene was a bit cute. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 466. The fat man is a master of formations. Sudbai has known this for a long time, but the young man surnamed Joe also seems to be well versed in this. After the two of them stared at each other for a while, the fat man squatted down and thrust the young man surnamed Joe into the ground. One of the flags was pulled out and changed its position. Wan, this is the right place to put this flag, do you understand? People from the powerful country, you are laughing so hard at me. Do you know what kind of formation model I set up? You must not use those pirated formation booklets exchanged in WeChat stores to make up for it. This is the 7th type of Tiangang trap devil. Changes, I know, because of the Red movement in those years in mainland China, many things have been lost, but these things are well preserved in Taiwan. The young man surnamed Joe also squatted down, pointing to the flag and showing disdain for the fat man said. Damn, does the ancestors' stuff have to be 100% correct, Fatty said with a stern look. If this point is set at the same position as before, the power of the formation will be maximized, but the stability of the formation has been weakened too much. Even someone who doesn't understand the formation can break your formation by just smashing it with his own strength. And if it is placed in the position I have chosen, although the power of the formation will not be significantly strengthened as a result, it can be said that the sky is brighter after taking a step back. The layout of the formation will immediately become larger, and the stability will also be greatly improved. Tiangang Trap Demon is originally a destructive array, focusing on short-term effects and quick damage to the enemy. If you change it like this, it will make this array ordinary. It is really like using a cannon to kill mosquitoes. The first element of a formation is stability. An unstable formation is garbage. The formation is not a decoration. The meaning of its existence is to assist the organizer to maximize the effect. If you want to pursue the stability of the formation, there are other formations to choose from. In fact, you have changed everything. You this self-righteous strong man. Fart, when did I say that formations are decorations? This is the Tiangang demonic array. Your opponents are not those bandits and bandits that your ancestors had to deal with. What you have to face are people who are about the same strength as you, or even they are listeners who are more powerful than you, and their formations are just like paper. You really think that others are mentally retarded, you self-righteous one. Subai stroked his forehead and could see that although the fat man and the young man surnamed Joe were fighting each other all the time, they were both squatting on the ground and planting small flags constantly. They were obviously having a great time. Also, there are very few listeners who are good at formations. On the surface, the two of them seem to be strong country people and the other is Wan, but they really have some sympathy for each other. The number of people in the campground was larger than Subai expected. There were estimated to be 15 people. However, only a few of them had the aura of senior listeners, and most of the rest had very weak auras. Or you can't detect any breath at all. After a while, the black man Klaus came back. He clapped his hands, and all the monks left the camp and stood behind Klaus. Thinking about it, Klaus should have contacted those lamas. If those lamas were not around, Subai and Fatty would not have to worry about the danger of being exposed. Moreover, Subai knew that even if those lamas were seriously injured again, they would not be able to wait. When the time came, they would always come out to pick fruits. The fat man and he wanted to sneak into this team first to see if we could get some benefits, and then take revenge when those lamas showed up. Okay, everyone. Klaus's voice was so loud that all the listeners in the camp came out of their tents. Most of them were impatient because the lamas who organized the event never showed up. Why is he a nigger? A middle-aged man in a t-shirt said. Western listeners must have stretched their hands too far. Brother, these lamas have long been like the West and have to wear a pair of trousers. They have a tradition. Didn't you see that man is still living in exile abroad and is treated as a distinguished guest? Another person reminded. Klaus fixed his eyes on the man in the t-shirt, smiled slightly, and showed off his white teeth. The teeth of black people seem to be particularly white because of their skin color. I originally thought that the Chinese were the least racist country, but it seems I was wrong. Faced with Klaus's obvious targeting, the man in the t-shirt did not fall behind. Since the location where the secret realm is developed and explored is in China, then the things inside naturally belong to our Chinese audience. What does it have to do with you, a nigger? Subai could feel the aura fluctuations on the man in the t-shirt. He must be a senior person, so he had the confidence to say such things. Tensions were rising over there. The man surnamed Joe and Fatty also ended their sweet argument. Fatty walked to Sudbai's side, while the man surnamed Joe stood in the crowd. He came by car with Klaus, but not siding with Klaus. In China, you give extra points to ethnic minorities and help build mosques. I have heard of these things. To be honest, I have been subject to color and racial discrimination since I was a child, so after knowing these things in China after the incident, I really regretted why I didn't grow up in China. China is such a fraternal country and a place that I have always longed for. Klaus sarcastically said, and then waved, this place is less than 10 kilometers away from the secret realm. It's all sloping and not suitable for driving, so let's just walk there. The masters have other things to do. They will come later, and I am the leader of this exploration activity. In my hands, I have a map and a way to enter the secret realm. If you want to follow me, just follow me. As for those who don't like me, a black man, you can choose to stay here and continue hiking, or book a flight back now. After Klaus finished speaking, he turned around and walked in the direction opposite to the Grand Canyon. The man in the t-shirt was the first to follow. Obviously, the audience is realistic and looks down on niggas. However, in the face of interests and possible opportunities, whether it is religious beliefs or racial discrimination, they can be ignored. The rest of the audience followed suit, with Sudbai and Fatty following behind. Dabai, it's really an adventure, but why do I feel so unsure? It's right to have no idea. Whoever discovered a place like the secret realm would have invited so many people to explore and develop it together instead of hiding it for fear of others finding out so that he could eat alone. That is, this secret realm is very dangerous and requires human lives to explore the path, and it is the lives of the listeners to explore the path. The audience must be aware of these things, but people and money die for food. Everyone feels that it will not be them who die, and they definitely feel that they can be favored and get opportunities. Fatty, let's not stand out this time. If the limelight is not right, then withdraw. We are here for revenge. The most important thing in this expedition is to participate. The key is that revenge is the most important thing. I understand this. My luck has been extremely bad recently. I know it well. I will arrange some detection arrays along the road later. I think those llamas will definitely follow and take advantage. If we find out, let's just turn around and kill them first. Sudbai nodded. A 10-kilometer road, especially on a plateau without means of transportation, is a great expense for ordinary people, but for the audience, it is nothing. Moreover, the roads here are always rugged and sloping, and cars cannot drive in at all. Ahead, a chasm appeared. It was much smaller than the Tulumbu Canyon, but there was indeed a fissure in the ground below, and the depth was even more terrifying. This crack in the ground appeared recently because of the earthquake, someone in the audience said. It is precisely because of the emergence of cracks in the ground that some interesting things appeared inside, so several masters organized this event and invited audience friends to dig together. Klaus went straight down and started climbing along the rock face. The audience above couldn't help but look at each other. If they had known that they were going to climb this, everyone would have brought some rock climbing equipment. Of course, most of the people with this kind of thinking were weak audience members. They also got the news, so they came here to fish in troubled waters. It's a matter of trying your luck. For more capable listeners, this kind of rock climbing won't be a problem at all. The man in the t-shirt and several other audience members immediately followed, and so did the man surnamed Joe. Dabai, let's go down too. Be careful. Sudbai and Fatty also started to climb down together. When they went down, there were about 5 or 6 listeners staying on top. Obviously, they really didn't have the guts to climb such a deep crack with their bare hands, especially if any of the listeners accidentally. The rest of the audience are probably just having fun and won't help at all. Everyone knows this. This kind of climbing lasted for nearly an hour. Because of the strong wind below, and because everyone wanted to hide themselves and reduce energy consumption, everyone was climbing with bare hands honestly. People show off their tricks. For example, Subai could have relied on the power of the windbreaker to make him go down faster and easier, but he still didn't do it, and Subai also knew that he was definitely not the only one who could glide in the air for such a short period of time. People. A total of 7 people came down, Klaus and the man named Joe, Subai and the fat man, the man in the t-shirt, and 2 others. One was a young woman wearing a down jacket, and the other was about 50 or 60 years old. Old man. At the bottom of the crack in the ground, something similar to an altar appeared. It was not well preserved and was fragmented, but some things were relatively complete. There are stone-carved eggs that look as tall as a human being. Next to the largest giant egg, there are 18 smaller stone eggs. There are many other stone objects nearby, even pots similar to clay pots. The things here seem to be very messy. If you just pick up a relatively complete one here, you can definitely sell it for a big price, but the people here are not interested in making cultural relics. They are not here to be cultural relic dealers. I don't care about that income either. Damn it, was this altar used by the ancients to sacrifice eggs? Fatty stood behind Subai and muttered, it's similar to worshipping Guanyin to treat infertility. No, it is said that the ancestor god of the Tibetan people was born in a huge egg, and then evolved into 18 smaller eggs. This is the ancestor of the Tibetan people. It is similar to the legend of Nuwa of the Han people who created humans, Subai explained. The entrance is right here, everyone, follow me. Klaus had obviously been here before, and he led everyone towards the depths of the altar in a familiar manner. At this moment, Fatty's sharp-eyed nature was revealed. Taking advantage of the fact that he and Subai were at the back, he avoided the sight of the others and immediately squatted down and stretched out his hand among the gravel, grabbing an item, but after taking it out, he shook his head in disappointment and whispered, it's not a magic weapon, it looks like copper. Subai took this thing from the fat man's hand. This is a bronzeware. It looks like the front part of a gun. It was the main weapon of the army before the Western Han dynasty. It's strange. The ancestors of Tibet also mastered the forging of bronzeware very early. Are you skilled? Subai said doubtfully while turning Ge over, and then his breathing suddenly stopped. There are a few words engraved on this Ge. In the 5th year of the reign of Prime Minister Lu Buwei, he issued an imperial edict to serve as Prime Minister and Gonggayan.